Blog Talk Radio.
Morning, wherever you are. Good morning, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon. This is Beyond the Gate Radio, and welcome to our spiritual and paranormal show where we think outside the box. This is our March 8th, 2018 edition of Beyond the Gate Radio. I'm your host, David, and the co-host, as usual, is Cheryll. Today, we have a fascinating and repeat guest, Garnet Schulhauser, sorry, not good with names. He's the author of 4 books. And let me tell you a little bit about Garnet. He's a retired lawyer who lives near Victoria on Vancouver Island with his wife, Kathy. After practicing corporate law for over 30 years in Calgary with 2 blue-chip law firms, he retired in 2008, and his first book, Dancing on the Stamp, was published in 2012. Since the release of his first book, Garnet has been active with book signing tours and speaking engagements and has been interviewed on over 130 and even now more, of course, talk shows broadcast from studios in the U.S., Canada, United Kingdom, Ireland, and Australia. His first book, Dancing on the Stamp, Garnet recounts how his life changed dramatically one day when he was confronted on the street by a homeless man named Albert, who was actually a wise spirit guide in disguise. This seemingly chance encounter launched a provocative dialogue with Albert, who disclosed startling new revelations about our true nature as eternal souls, the cycle of reincarnation on earth, and the afterlife that awaits us all. His second book, Dancing Forever with Spirit, describes his next encounter with Albert, who guided him on a series of astral adventures to visit the spirit side, the Akashic records, distant planets with fascinating life forms, and a human civilization that made the shift to a new Earth. And his third book, Dance of Heavenly Bliss, continues the saga of his astral trips with Albert, who took him to meet Gaia, the consciousness of Mother Earth, 2 of Earth's mythical creatures, a Sasquatch and an Irish fairy, a human civilization on another planet that is ruled by woman, and many fascinating souls on the spirit side who regaled him with tales of their lives on earth, including Moses, Jesus, and his Mother Mary, Lucifer, and Goddess Athena, which is all very compelling. Dance of Rapture, Eternal Rapture, is the 4th book in the tetralogy of Author's Dialogue and Astral Adventures with a Spirit Guide that begin when he was confronted on the street by the homeless man Albert, which started his book writing journey and his spiritual journey. So in this 4th book, the author describes his most recent astral trips with Albert, who introduced him to some wise and famous souls in the spirit realm, including Muhammad, Buddha, Mary Magdalene, and Jesus, all of whom revealed startling new truths about their lives on earth. As well, he was honored to hear words of wisdom from 2 famous archangels, Ariel and Michael, and to meet Aphrodite, the goddess of love, who had earned much respect on earth for her sage advice on love and sex. On another excursion to the spirit realm, he was thrilled to meet 2 of his favorite entertainers, Elvis Presley and Robin Williams, who enthralled him with their heartfelt tales of drug abuse and despondency that led to their tragic deaths, after which Albert introduced him to Leonardo da Vinci, who revealed the secrets behind his Mona Lisa and the Last Supper paintings. On the earth plane, the author met with Gaia, the consciousness of Mother Earth, who reiterated her warning that humans must stop polluting our planet and abusing her beloved creatures or things would end very badly for our civilization. And he was enchanted by another of Gaia's mythical creatures, a beautiful mermaid who was sensitive, intelligent, and very adept at avoiding detection by humans. Elsewhere in the galaxy, he encountered an advanced human civilization that eradicated all diseases and negative emotions through genetic engineering, which allowed its citizens to live in a peaceful harmony free from violence and crime. And one of his most fascinating adventures involved a journey to Earth in a parallel universe where the American Civil War never happened because Europe had abolished slavery before the colonization of America. And the World Trade Towers in New York were still standing because Islam did not exist as a religion due to the tragic death of Muhammad at an early age. That is all so very fascinating and compelling information. So without further ado, welcome to Beyond the Gate, Garnet. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm good, David. How about you? And thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. We always enjoy having you on, and this is not the first time. So if I may, I'm a psychic medium, and everybody has different gifts. To be a musician, an attorney, somebody that can make great arts and do wonderful things like Leonardo da Vinci, of course. So we all have different gifts, but I think there's something that's kind of, I would say, that's innate in us, and that's like a sixth sense. I'm a medium, but also psychic, so I trust my intuition. I think we all have some type of intuition at different levels. Like some people, it's dormant or seldom used, or some people don't trust it that much. And I know some people that aren't sure what it is, but they trust it, and it really helps them out. May I ask that early in your life, as a youth, did you ever experience any what we call metaphysical things, or have any experiences with spirits, or any psychic intuition that got your attention, or any time through your professional life did you ever use intuition? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
David, I never did have any psychic experiences or any occasions in my youth where I sort of recognized that there was a intuition that was coming to guide me. Maybe some of those things happened. I don't remember them. But I didn't really, and I'm sure during my career, like everyone else, we all get these intuitive messages, these flashes of intuition, and I'm sure that I had some. Nothing sticks out in my mind, but I'm sure that I often probably acted on them. And of course, Albert tells me that, as you probably agree with this, David, is that most of the intuitive messages, the flashes of intuition, those are messages coming from our spirit guides, and they're directed to us, hopefully, that we can understand and hear them and act on them. And all too often, we just ignore them, or we don't know what they are or where they're coming from. So until I met Albert, I'm sure I had a lot of these messages. I don't recall anything specific where I really acted on it, but I'm sure that I was have been guided all through my life. Well, it wasn't until I met Albert that I really realized that that these intuitive messages really are coming from the spirit realm, coming from your guides, trying to steer people in the right direction, which is the direction they had planned for themselves before they incarnated. And so, no, there was nothing notable before I met Albert, and then all of a sudden it all came together in a rush when Albert jumped into my life.
Yes, sometimes we receive subtle messages like you're at Starbucks and you're looking at that muffin with cheese dripping out of it and meat, and you know that, well, I don't need that. And you start to reach for it, and then suddenly you decide for some reason, nah, I don't need that. That could be a subtle way, but I guess it comes out more in a noticeable way like you have experienced later in life. Like, I guess it's what we call late bloomers, that you've meant to take the journey that you actually have taken before you met Albert, was necessary before certain things were revealed to you. Otherwise, if it happened sooner, you probably never would have written these books and had these amazing journeys. That's my feeling on it. What do you think? Do you think it came at the right time in your life?
Oh, absolutely. I think that I really needed to have my law practice of the 34 years, whatever it was, practicing law, to set up the foundation for my next stage of life, which is sort of post-Albert and writing books and spreading his message. So I think that was all a very necessary preliminary planning, in terms of my life, even though I wasn't aware of it. And excuse me, and I think that Albert absolutely came at the right time. And he told me beforehand that he and I had planned sort of his meeting with me before I was born as sort of part of my life plan. I don't remember that, of course. Nobody remembers their life plan, but it was all planned beforehand. And it was really, like in Albert's view, it wouldn't have done any good if he had come to me when I was 25 or 35 or even 45. I had to be at the right time. So he did come at the right time, and I was really ready for a change and ready to hear his message. It was like the Buddhists say, when the student is ready to learn, a teacher will appear. Well, Albert appeared at the right time.
So you must have been sitting down one day, and sometimes when you sit down, your mind just relaxes and starts to wander, and it opens up to certain things. And you notice this person, and dialogue started, and everything changed from there. That's amazing. You just never know. When something's going to happen, it's usually always unexpected and not planned for. Does that sound logical to you?
Absolutely. Yeah, certainly my meeting with Albert in terms of my life here was not planned for. It was a total surprise. Even though I had planned it with Albert before I was born, but of course we all forget that. We forget where we came from and what we had planned for our life. So in terms of this life, totally unexpected. I had no preliminary warning. Nothing to ever indicate to me that something as dramatic as that was going to happen to me, and so so I was startled. It was really just came out of the blue. This homeless man who sort of stopped me in my tracks, sent me this amazing wave of unconditional love, and then once I sat down and started talking with him, I realized that he was truly an amazing, very wise, compassionate, loving soul. And when he said he's my spirit guide, to me it was like I totally believed it, because he was just a very special person. But there was nothing beforehand that ever prepped me for that, at least not I'm aware of it, to have this meeting. It just sort of came out of the blue.
Well, that's amazing, because a lot of people would question something like that, or maybe they don't study things from the spiritual realm. There's no fundamental training that they've had that they can glean from. It's just somebody who's never really thought about do much, and then something so fantastic happens to you that you said, you know what, there must be something to this. This just couldn't be. And I suppose that was enough to trigger you to look into it a little bit more. So after meeting this person, what did you do? What was your next step in the journey before we get to your current book?
Well, I just knew he was, as I said, he was a special person as soon as I met him. And then when I asked him questions, he just had the clarity and wisdom of his answers were just so compelling that it was just like, I had no doubt in my heart that what he's telling me was the truth. I mean, it just resonated with me. And so we had this conversation. Initially, the first part of our relationship was a dialogue, and I'd ask him questions he would answer. And then he told me, after we had been speaking for a while, that he wanted me to write a book about what he told me, because he wanted them to be available to everyone else on the planet. And I was a bit taken aback by that, because I had never even dreamed of writing a book. But anyway, he was gently persuasive over a period of months, and finally I agreed and said, okay, yeah, I'll write the book, which I did, which led to the manuscript for my first book, Dancing on a Stamp. But even after I had written it, David, I was still sort of like concerned about, well, should I really get this published, or should I just throw it in the drawer and lock the door and never let it see the light of day again? But after a while, I just realized I had to do it. I had to publish it, and recognizing that a lot of my former partners and colleagues and clients would sort of roll their eyes and wonder if I was losing my mind. But I did it anyway, and so I've lost some of those people, and I've gained a lot more new people who are spiritually enlightened. So it's been a very rewarding change for me. And my relationship with Albert has been great. And after my first encounter, as you mentioned in the introduction, he took me on a series of astral trips to the spirit side, where I talked with many famous wise souls who told me about their lives on Earth, other places in the universe, other places on our planet, where he could demonstrate to me sort of the abuse that humans were heaping on other animals on our planet and on Mother Earth herself. It was all sort of a learning tool for me, and everything that I saw, I put into one of my books. And so I'm now, as you mentioned, I now have written 4 books. The first one was my dialogue. The last 3 were about my astral travels with him, and it was all very well planned out by Albert. He would never tell me where I was going or what he was going to show me next, so it was always a surprise. But he had a very set out agenda. It wasn't just random trips. He wanted me to see certain people, see certain places, so that I could write about them. And he hoped that when people read my books, that there would be some sort of an enlightenment, and that they would be able to move up the spiritual ladder and raise their vibrations. That was his whole goal.
I totally believe in that. That's fascinating. And as in friends and books in your life, I believe in that old saying, when one door closes, another one opens. And this time it was a big door. So
Absolutely.
On the astral travel, I think there's a reason why it wasn't revealed to you what you were going to do tonight. Like, where are we going out to dinner tonight? What movie are you going to see? Who are you going to meet? Because I feel that maybe it was kept from you until the moment of the meeting, because as human beings we have expectations, and it might ruin the experience. And so if you're surprised and you see it, it is what it is. I totally believe that. And you mentioned, like Dance of Heavenly Bliss, that you met different spirits like Moses, Jesus, Mother Mary, Lucifer, and the goddess Athena, and so forth. So if you don't mind me asking before we go into your current book, what was it like? Did you have positive experiences with the aforementioned names that I just said, like Mary,
Absolutely.
Lucifer, and...
Yeah, absolutely, all positive. And a lot of people sort of question when they say Lucifer in there, because they equate Lucifer with the devil, with Satan, and it's actually totally the opposite. And that's one of the reasons why Albert took me to see Lucifer, just to demonstrate to me that this soul, who is a very benevolent angel, a very good spirit, who had been badly maligned over the ages by people who had, as I said, equated him with being the devil or the Prince of Darkness, and he was totally the opposite. He was a very, very loving, kind, compassionate soul who actually, contrary to what some people had said, he wasn't the personification of evil on Earth. He was actually a good guy who tried his best to prevent evil. So he was sort of like 180 degrees from what a lot of the people have already determined in their minds that he was. So that was why Albert took me to see Lucifer, to show me that, well, hold it, a lot of humans just have the total wrong picture of this guy. But all the other souls, very positive experience, David. They were all really wise, compassionate, loving souls who for the most part, most of them were masters who had incarnated on Earth, walked the Earth for the sole purpose of helping humans become more spiritually enlightened and overcome their propensity for violence and crime and so on. And so they all had a very set purpose. They incarnated specifically to help humanity, and now they're back on the spirit side, where they're sort of watching what's going on, but they're still very, very wise and compassionate souls, and I expect at some point some of them may walk the earth again. But it was all a very positive experience for me.
Oh, that's good. That's really wonderful. I've had in my mediumship encounters or readings or astral travels, which either was initiated or uninitiated, astral travels. I don't believe I've had any bad experiences either. Maybe dreams if I'm need to learn a lesson, or if I'm stressing on something. But the actual contact, or whatever you want to call it, encounters have always, for me, been positive as well. And can you tell us a little bit about your new book, Dance of Eternal Rapture? Is there some experiences you'd like to talk to us about, or anything at all?
Yeah, I mean, it was again another sort of like a guided tour from my spirit guide, and there was a number of things that were very notable. I mean, one of the things that really stuck out in my mind was in terms of famous souls on the spirit side. I had a meeting with Muhammad. Muhammad, of course, was the founder, the originator of Islam, and so it was very fascinating. He was a very kind, compassionate, wise soul. And I had this very frank discussion with him. And I said, you originated Islam way back when, and it's now sort of a very large, probably the second largest religion on the planet. And there's a lot of people adhere to it, and there's a lot of people, extremists in that religion, who have caused a lot of abuse and conflict and wars and violence. And I said, what do you think about what's going on? And he said, well, his religion has done a lot of good things. He says. And he's proud of the good things that it has accomplished. But he was very dismayed at 2 points, two things that sort of happened with his religion. The first one was that he was very upset at the men who had used Islam as a justification for the abuse and subjugation of women. And he said it was never his intention to have anything in his religion, anything that he taught, or any of the messages he got from Gabriel. It was never intended in any way to be used as an excuse to degrade women. And so he just thinks that's nonsense, that women should be treated equally like men. They shouldn't be compelled to wear headscarves or cover their whole face or cover their whole body. In some of the countries, as you know, David, the women can't go out in public unless accompanied by their husband or a male relative. In some countries, like Saudi Arabia, until recently, they couldn't even drive a car. A lot of the countries, the girls aren't allowed to have an education or get a job, and he just says that's absolutely deplorable, not what he intended, not what his religion was all about, and he wished that somehow somebody could do something about it, but he was very upset about that. The other part that he was very upset about was that some of the extremists, some of the people that we know, the terrorists and so on, who are using Islam and the religion as an excuse to inflict violence and terror on other people and innocent people in other countries. You know, the ISIL people who caused a lot of wars and destruction in Syria and Iraq. I mean, they were masquerading as being people who were sort of trying to they were as religious jihadists, that they were religious people trying to make the world better through religion. And he just says, well, using religion as an excuse for violence is just wrong. And so he's very upset about that. And he just said, he never intended anyone to use violence to convert other people or to strike down people who did not adhere to that religion. And so it was very interesting. He was very candid. He said, those 2 points really upset me, but the rest of my religion I feel very good about. And so it was a bit of an eye-opener for me.
I bet. And, I have nothing against religions or anybody's belief system or an atheist or whatever. Nothing against that. I'm open to everything. I don't judge anybody. I'm a happy guy. I don't judge anybody. But I just have to tell you that, perhaps some people in power want to alter things in a religion and make it swing in their favor so they could have more power over the people, so they change religion in certain ways. And I'm thinking that, again, have nothing against religion, but it reminds me of a cartoon I saw. There's a little UFO or flying saucer. These two aliens in there are flying toward the Earth, and you can see mushroom clouds coming up all around the Earth. And one says, "Hey, Orc, what's going on down there?" And then Orc says, "Oh, they're just all the religions are trying to prove which one's the most peaceful." If you get my meaning.
Well, I love
so
that.
Sometimes
that's
you gotta look
cartoon.
at the funny side. You know what I mean? But I don't.
But your take on
religions
is quite accurate, David. Because it's not just the Islam. It's the Christian Church has done things like that in the past. A lot of organized religions do those things because, as you say very correctly, is because they're run by men who are using religion to as a way to control people and for power and control, and that's why. And men are men, and men have their own agendas, and they let their negative emotions sort of rule their lives all too often, like greed and lust for power. And that's really one of the big problems with organized religion. So, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what happens with most religions.
In a way, I can't blame them in some cases where they needed to keep civilization under control so there's not chaos. But then, as we come to modern times, then need to ease up and maybe change some things for modern times. But that's another story. Anyway, so that's very interesting insight you gave on Speak to Muhammad. And then what?
Well, there was a number of, on this show, I can only highlight some of the things because there's a lot of things in the book that I'll never get to. But one of the interesting things is that, it was mentioned in the synopsis, in some of my earlier trips, I had, Albert had taken me to, he had basically said, look, I was surprised when I had my conversation with Gaia. I was surprised that our planet, Mother Earth, had a consciousness. And had feelings and emotions, and so that surprised me. And when I finished the meeting with Gaia, Albert said, that's just one of the things that you're not aware of, that Gaia has many things up her sleeve that you're not aware of, or that it hasn't been proven, or it's not open knowledge. And back in there, he took me to meet a Sasquatch and an Irish fairy, both sort of fabled mythical creatures that some people believe exist, and most people just say it's just a fairy tale. But I actually met those. And then I had another encounter. He showed me one more of Gaia's mythical creatures, a mermaid. And so this was really quite amazing because this was there's been legends about mermaids over the ages that they sort of have, the top part is human, and the bottom part is fish, and we've seen all kinds of pictures of them. Most people scoff at it, but I actually met one, and she was a very loving and compassionate mermaid her name was Lyra, and she told me that, and Albert had arranged this meeting, and she told me that, yeah, they are for real, and they've been around for eons, and they've managed to escape detection by humans for the most part. Occasionally they're sighted, but for the most part, nobody's been able to capture them or take a photo of them or actually, grab onto them and say, look to the world, here's a mermaid, because they're very clever. They can basically stay underwater for about 2 hours. They can swim in incredibly fast speeds, and they can actually hear the thoughts of humans, those around them. So by knowing sort of what humans are up to and where they're going and how they're coming for them, they can easily escape detection. And 70% of our planet is oceans. So there's a big playground for them, lots of places to hide, and so they've been able to escape detection. And they are sort of a race that's very close to nature. They don't have any technology. They don't need it. They're very, very close to Gaia, and they're a bit dismayed at all the abuse that humans have been heaping on Mother Earth with our pollution and how we abuse other animals. And they would really like to live freely among humans, but they're just afraid that if they show up one day and say, "Hi, here we are," that they'll be captured and put into a circus sideshow or into a lab and poked and prodded forever. So they don't want that. But they've been around, and they communicate with each other by telepathy. They're very very wise and very empathetic. They understand the feelings of other creatures, and they have nothing against humans. They just don't want to be around us while we're still violent and abusive. And so there it was. She's living, breathing example of a fabled creature that actually does exist. So that was quite fascinating, and I really it sort of opened up my heart when she said, we were created eons ago by some ETs who mutated a human or crossed human genes with a now extinct fish, and so they really are mammals. They suckle their young with milk, and they're just like humans from the waist up, but from the bottom down they were just like a fishtail. They're really very fascinating, and so people who these legends just don't pop out of nowhere, and there's been legends and stories about mermaids for hundreds of years. And you know the old saying, David, when there's smoke, there's usually some fire somewhere. And so I did indeed find out.
I believe that. And, they've been reported widely throughout the ages in different geographical locations around this planet. Additionally, Sasquatch, why hasn't anybody caught one? Some people think they're interdimensional or whatever, but they're very elusive as well. And other, under the cryptozoology field, that's what they call it, these other unusual creatures. Now, in ancient Egypt, in some of the pyramids, they have half dog, half bird, half human, half whatever animal. And some people, researchers, have proposed that these beings actually did exist. They wouldn't put cartoons up in the pyramids and the palaces and temples and so forth. It's when people look up to the pharaoh, when you see stuff there, you don't want to see any garbage or cartoons. Very respectful, very important, very expensive. They wouldn't just put that up there. There was a bunch of hoo-ha. Not somebody capable of doing what they did. So there and in Sumerian, Texas, and other places have been discovered strange things as well. So this has been going on for eons. So there must be definitely some truth to that. And you're right, some creatures are just like fairies, are very elusive, yet they exist. Now, you mentioned about E.T. Could I ask you a question? Do you know anything about Roswell? Or
Roswell?
You
mean the Roswell 1947?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I did. And actually, I sort of what happened in the Albert took me to the Akashic Records, and I saw what happened in Roswell 1947, the very famous incident where the flying saucer, according to many witnesses, crashed in the desert, and then the saucer was hauled away, and it was denied by the government and military officials. Yeah, I did see that on the Akashic Records, and yes, it was. It was a little ET scout ship that for whatever reasons a malfunction crashed into one of the high altitude weather balloons that was being used by the military, crashed into that, which then knocked out other systems and ended up crashing in the desert floor. And there were 3 little aliens inside. 2 of them were dead. One was still alive, and the saucer and all the aliens were hauled away to the Roswell Army Air Base. And the doctors there tried to save the one little alien that was still alive, but after working hard for several days, it just died. And so the saucer and the aliens were put into preservatives. The saucer and these aliens first went off to Andrews Air Force Base and eventually ended up in Area 51. So I did see what exactly happened, and excuse me, and it certainly was an alien craft. And Albert has showed me and a number of these crafts, and he's told me that we've been visited by advanced alien races for eons, like right from day one on Earth, and they've been visiting us. They're all benevolent. They're all trying to help us, help humans, and for the most part, they're the many different races are just watching what's going on. And there was a marked increase in the number of those races who visited Earth after we split the A-bomb in World War II, because that was sort of a big a red flag, a trigger point. It's like, these barbaric humans have now learned to split the atom, and so we better get in there and see what's going on and try to make sure that they don't destroy themselves or travel to other planets and destroy whoever they see there. So, yeah, we've been watched for a long time.
I would certainly think that if we were the superior race in at least this galaxy, let's say, for example, and we found Stone Age people living on another planet, wouldn't you want to learn scientifically to watch them progress? And then wouldn't you be worried if they did have the A-bomb? Of course, that makes total sense. Like I said, They're all, benevolent beings, and they don't want the malevolent earthlings to go up. And we've already polluted our oceans, as a byproduct of growing humanity and dumping stuff. Now do it in space. So I think these experiences that individuals have that publish books about it is trying to make people aware that we need to make a change before it's too late. That's just it in a nutshell, I suppose. But also we're learning and growing and spiritually progressing, just like you said, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And that message that you just said was really hit home to me by Gaia when I had the conversation. She said, until humans used to not really cause much of a problem in terms of pollution and upsetting the climate and so on until the Industrial Revolution. Then we had the ability then to increase our pollution exponentially, with the advent of the Industrial Revolution and the oil and gas drilling and the burning of coal and all the other stuff. And she says, since then we've become like an invasive weed that's sort of taking over the whole garden. And she's very protective of all of her animals and her plants and her atmosphere and her environment. And she's very upset about what humans are doing. Like our horrible pollution. The oceans, the rivers, the air, the soil. We have been polluting it in great amounts, and we're getting a little better at sort of curtailing it, but we still do way too much of it. And she's saying, we have to change our ways, or it's going to end very badly for us. The planet Earth is our home. If we continue on the current path, we're going to end up destroying our home and destroying all life on it. And she really doesn't want that to happen. And nor do the ETs. They're trying to do their best to make sure that doesn't happen to humanity on this planet. But we really have to change our ways, or it could end badly.
Yeah, many people believe the wealthy elite don't want clean, free energy. They can charge you for gas and oil and stay in power, run the world, the banks and all that. So they buy patents to somebody that invents anti-gravity, clean energy, whatever, buy it out and say buy, and then lock it away. And because they say, well, if we use clean energy, how do you charge for it? I'm thinking about if it's free energy, and you want to make some money, just charge for it for free energy. I don't know. That's better than, what's polluting our atmosphere, our oceans, and our earth is, I don't know. So people have to work together and keep fighting like Tesla, to bring this cleaner energy out. And I'm thinking that Tesla is showing an example perhaps where he can make money off of clean automobiles. And maybe if somebody was to get another idea, then we can get off of fossil fuels one of these days that we're addicted to. I don't know, but I'm certainly hoping that things get better, not worse.
Yeah, I think, and I certainly hope that as well. And there's a lot of people pulling for us to try to get us down that road. And I think we are getting a little better at it, but we need to step up the pace, and we have to make sure that we continue on and make sure everyone's aware of what we have to do. And it was interesting that people, a lot of people are talking about climate change. And it seems like over the last 10 years that the number and intensity of natural disasters like droughts and floods and hurricanes and tornadoes and volcanoes and earthquakes and so on, they seem to be picking up and getting worse, at least to my perception. And what I found out was that when I talked to Gaia, she basically said, yes, I have the ability to manipulate those events to some degree. And she says, I've been trying to pick up the pace recently because I want humans to wake up. And she said, I'm trying to fire a warning shot across your bow to make you aware that if you don't change your ways and quit the pollution and abuse of the animals, that these things are going to continue to increase. And so some people say it's climate change. I know now, after talking to Gaia, that it's actually Gaia who's manipulating these events, making them harsher and more intense, so that we will wake up and realize which path we have to take. So,
apparently it's working because there's debates on both sides.
Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah. And anyway, another interesting thing that described in my book, which is just sort of, in a way, it's kind of enlightening, is that I found out on one of my travels just after I had met with this mermaid, David, that Albert told me that way back when Earth actually had two moons. We had another moon, which was bigger than our current moon, the one we see all the time, and it actually had an atmosphere. It actually was home to a number of animals, and and it was bigger. And he said back then it was quite amazing when you saw the two moons in the sky at the same time. And I said, well, what happened to the other moon? He said, well, it was a freak cosmic accident. A comet went through the solar system, smashed into this other moon, basically broke it up, and most of the fragments ended up in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. But he said that some of the ETs, just before the comet hit, scooped up some of the animals on that planet and brought them to Earth. And they deposited these animals in Australia. And interesting enough, those animals were like emus and marsupials and, like kangaroos, wallabies, koalas, and so on. Those animals are, for the most part, unique to And so they were deposited there, and I said, well, why Australia in particular? And he said, well, because Australia has Ayers Rock, or what they now call Uluru, that great sandstone red thing in the northern desert.
I'm familiar with that, yes.
Yeah, Ayers Rock, excuse me. And he said the reason they did that was because Ayers Rock, or Uluru, is a sort of a communications beacon for Gaia, one of the many that she has. And so they felt that these animals would feel at home and sort of more welcome if they could be close to this communication beacon of Gaia. And she sends out vibrations through that rock to the surrounding area, and so those animals then sort of resonated with those vibrations, and they felt at home. And that's why they chose Australia for these animals. And so it was really quite amazing. And right to this day, a lot of those animals in Australia are still unique only to Australia. And so that was a very interesting story about how that all happened.
That's very believable, very interesting. And to the white people, I suppose, that came there, it's a very mystical place. But to the Aborigines, it's a very sacred place. And they wouldn't call a rock sacred for nothing. They have knowledge that spans way back before written history, and they know something of the space people. So that kind of ties in what you just said right there. It's really amazing. And then I want to go off a little bit in a different direction. Elvis Presley, I've always been a fan. Robin Williams, too. In fact, I met Robin in person because he lived in a neighborhood, kind of like a neighbor where Cheryll and I lived. And he passed away. Both of them did. I've heard, some famous psychic twins we had on our show. Previously, they've written a book about meeting celebrities, and they actually talked to them as well. And other people have too. So I don't want the audience to think that you're just making it up, because this is actually true. And these are from some very, very credible people, and what was said was proven out to be true. So what kind of message did Elvis and Robin Williams have for you?
Well, Robin Williams, start off with him. He basically said that where he is now back in the spirit side, he looked back in his life and says he regrets taking his own life. But he said at the time he felt he was trapped in a vicious cycle, and there was no other escape. And he said money was an issue. He even though he had made a lot of money, his lifestyle and that of his family, they spent a lot of money, and he was sort of felt like he was being pushed into a position where, in order to survive financially, he'd have to do another Mrs. Doubtfire movie, which he didn't want to do, even though that movie was very popular and made a lot of money. And so he was kind of depressed about all this. And then the last straw, he said, was when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. So it's kind of like, oh no, that's it. I just can't do this anymore. So he committed suicide. And his advice to everyone who's listening is that if you're chronically depressed, don't feel embarrassed about getting medical help or getting help from your family and your friends. Like you need to seek help, and if you can seek help, you may be able to avoid the tragedy that he had by committing suicide. So he really said, there's a lot of people out there who are fighting with silently fighting depression, like really drastic depression, and he says, go get help, medical help. Tell your family what's going on. They can help you, and don't go to the point where he did, where he committed suicide. So, very wise advice, I think. And in terms of Elvis, fairly similar story. He regrets, what happened in his life. I mean, he was addicted, alcohol and drugs. and he really felt sort of trapped again. He felt that he had to keep on going to not disappoint his friends, his fans, and so he didn't want to sort of retire. So he felt like he had to keep on going, but at the end he just hated it, and he was just in a vicious downward cycle with all the drugs and alcohol, and he ended up in having a tragic death. And he basically says, whatever situation you're in, just like what Robin Williams said, is that there's always a way out. It's never hopeless. There's always people who are willing to help you, and once you sort of turn the corner and get past that, you can get on with the next stage of your life. So it was really two guys who really had very tragic lives, who are really hoping that other people hearing what they have to say won't fall into the same trap.
So do you ever get any flack from people saying, well, if you commit suicide, you go into hell and you can't possibly see him anymore or whatever? Were they in a wonderful place?
Yeah, they were on the spirit side.
Obviously
they were
they
on the
were,
spirit
right?
Side where everyone else goes. You see, there is no place else to go. There is no hell. No matter how bad you are on earth, no matter whether you commit suicide or whatever, everyone goes back to the spirit side from where you came from. And there it's just an amazing, beautiful place, much like heaven that the religions describe. And they were just fine there. They were in a place of pure, unconditional love. There's no pain, suffering, negative emotions, so it's a great place to be. But when they look back at their earthly lives, they could see where they should have done things differently. And people who say, well, if you commit suicide, you go to hell, that's nonsense. There is no hell, and everyone goes back to the spirit side, even if you commit suicide. So those are two examples of, they're back there. And when you finish your life, David, you have a life review, and you look back at the life you just finished, and that's just the purpose of looking at all the places where you went off course, the mistakes you made. You also can see all the good things you did. So you just do a review and evaluation of the life you just finished, and then if you want to, you can plan another life, or if you don't want to, you can just stay on the spirit side. And but it's right now, when I met them on the spirit side, it was just amazing. They were having a great time. It's just like everyone else on the spirit side does. It's not like planet Earth. It's just nothing but happiness and bliss and joy and a lot of very interesting challenges.
So as a medium, from another perspective, I stopped counting my readings at 3,000, but I've met all kinds of spirits. Every time I do a reading for somebody, I've seen spirits that were earthbound, what people call ghosts, and communicated with them, photographed them, seen it with my naked eyes, and communicated, psychically, whatever. But the ones in the spirit world, as people call heaven, I've never spoken to any spirit in any reading, and some readings I've done has been like up to 4 hours. The longest readings really wears you out, but I have empirical proof because I get the same thing over and over again and bring evidence that people didn't reveal. There's no way you could know what I'm being told and tell them, and they're shocked, And so I bring in a family of people, and then they're asking about their brother who committed suicide. Well, that person comes in too, and they're up
Absolutely.
there. They're not in any flames. And I notice that every time I'm talking to a spirit, for the most part, is that I see him standing on grass with beautiful trees. Like you go to Yosemite and you want to take a selfie of yourself in the meadow in Yosemite National Park because it's so beautiful. Or it's like they're standing there. Every time I do a reading after reading after reading after reading, they're always in a place of beauty, and they all have a sense of humor, whatever. So, yeah,
that's exactly
I totally
my
agree
experience.
With your experience.
Yeah, that's exactly what my encounters on the spirit side is. That they have just beautiful countryside, beautiful meadows, lakes, trees, everything else. It's just amazingly beautiful. Everyone's happy. And it's just a wonderful place, and you've obviously seen that yourself through your readings, and you get the same message. And so to me, it's very validating to hear you say that, David, because it really confirms what I've seen, and I know a lot of other people who have written about similar things. And so, it is true. It's absolutely, totally true, and you're not making it up, and I'm not making it up, and I hope people out there believe that this is really the case.
Garnet, hi, excuse me, guys. This is Cheryll. Hi, Garnet.
Hi.
Thank you for being here. I have a question also, though. I hear what you're saying, and then I hear these different. I see these different shows. Like what you're speaking of is just like the show Defending Your Life with that I watched, and some of the shows, they really, it's like, how do they know exactly what was going on? And it's making me believe that other people are having encounters or spiritual guides that are helping them in planning these movies, and just the information that they get is so powerful. It's like Robin Williams did that one, Dreams That Come, Dreams That May That Come. He did this really powerful life and life after death show, and talked about, living and, passing away and where he went, and then him and his wife decided to come back and do it again. It's just like, who are these, how, there must be more guides out there that are pulling back the veil, so to speak, and letting people, I don't want to say just in the movie industry, to promote these movies that show things that I'm finding out to be the real way that they are.
And I think that's right, Cheryl. I mean, and I have no doubt that the screenwriters who for these movies, the directors, the producers, I have no doubt that they are getting messages from their guides about what things are really like, and so they're really, when they're doing the screenplays, this isn't just coming out of thin air. It's coming from the spirit realm. Their guides are sending them messages about what it's like, and then they're developing their screenplays based on that, and that's why it's so. In a lot of those movies, I watched that Robin Williams movie that you mentioned, and it was very, very close to the mark. And a lot of the other ones, that the Defending Your Life one, was a bit over dramatic in the sense that when the person died, they instead of being a life review where it's just a learning tool, it was like a court case where you had to sort of defend what you did on Earth, and if you didn't pass that, you had to go back. So that was just a bit literary license there, because that's not exactly what happens, but it made for a good movie. I remember, quite enjoyed it.
It did make for a good movie. It did, but it kind of put that spin on it that, this is how we as humans would do. We would turn it into a court case, but. But listening to you and finding out about the books and finding out about Albert, it's so, what it does is, I think it's like when they were trying to explain to people, they don't want to shock you and to say, oh yes, there's aliens, blah, 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 but they want to spoon feed you with just a little bit at a time. So by the time you actually encounter an alien, or by the time you actually encounter your spirit guide, you're not so shocked that these things have been going on for years, and you're not going to be so desensitized to being, you're not going to be scared that you see one. You'll be more inquisitive instead of, frightened, instead of it being a scary event. So I do appreciate the research, and I do appreciate the information that makes a big, it's a big deal to me.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Cheryl, and they are sort of laying the groundwork for example, the ETs. There's been more and more sightings, and there's more and more people who now believe in ETs, so that when they decide to actually make open and direct contact, like, hey world, here we are, it won't scare the heck out of the masses, that a lot of people will be just prepared for it. And in terms of spiritual enlightenment, you've probably noticed over the last 20 years there's been an increasing amount of spiritual enlightenment, more books on spirituality, on some of the topics that I've written about, and that you people talk about all the time.
Yes.
Way back when, 40 years ago, there was not any of this, and so it's coming more to the forefront. There's more messengers sending the message out there, and that's trying to prep humans to understand who they are, and to have them sort of focus on what they need to accomplish to make our world a better place.
I agree. Times have changed because back in the 70s, I called in a radio show to talk about UFOs, flying saucers, whatever, and they laughed me off the air. And you can't even talk about seeing ghosts and spirits. They laugh you off the air. Nowadays, there's a multitude of shows, you know, on that subject now, and it's become incredible. So I just want to tell everybody it's on the bio on the show page. If you want to find out more information about Garnet and his books and everything, his Facebook account, Twitter, and YouTube and everything, just go to GarnetSchulhauser.com. His email is contact@GarnetSchulhauser.com. Facebook, you can reach him by going facebook.com/Dancing on the Stamp, or go to youtube.com/user/Garnet Schulhauser, and twitter.com @GSchulhauser. So go on there and check it out. One more thing I want to say before we finish this up, and you need to say what you want to say, is don't you think that to spiritually progress, to evolve, why would somebody leave a paradise and come here to this crappy place, which is also beautiful? Maybe it's because Earth is a school, and if you're sitting on heaven and floating on the cloud, you're not going anywhere, you're happy, and then you get like island fever, and I say, I want to do something, I'm tired of this. You don't realize how grateful you should be until you're sent to Earth. Now you're cold, you're hungry, you're in the body, you have to survive and learn. Don't you think that Earth is a school?
Absolutely, it is, David. And according to Albert, it's one of the toughest schools in the universe. It's a very tough school. And we come here. I mean, that's a question everyone says, if including me. I said to Albert, well, the spirit side is such a wonderful place. Why would I ever choose to come here and live, have an incarnation as a human? And he says, well, you're looking at it from a human perspective because you're sitting there in the middle of this planet Earth, which can be very unpleasant at times. And like you say, you could be cold, you could be hungry, you can be poor, you can be subject to violence. None of that happens on the spirit side. But he says on the spirit side, you can look down at what's happening on Earth and you can see what's going on, but that's just book learning. And he says you can't really understand the totality of what happens on Earth until you actually physically incarnate. Then you get a hands-on experience, and that's what really helps you to grow and evolve and to complete your knowledge with wisdom because you've actually been there. And so that's why we do it. Difficult for us to understand, but it makes sense when you're on the spirit side.
So if I read a book about Peru and Machu Picchu, I say, oh, that's really interesting, but it's not to actually go there that you can see how majestic it is. And then you begin to realize, how could any human being have dragged these huge things up here and built a magnificent, site up there? So yeah, you're right. His experience is the best teacher, I guess. Am I correct? And then
absolutely.
Your guide was teaching you. Your guide was teaching you for a reason, so you can teach us.
Well, I'm certainly trying my best, and hopefully I can spread his wisdom to everyone through my books, and that's my mission, and I'm quite happy to be his messenger. He's got many messengers. I'm just one of them, and I like to work alongside people like you and Cheryll, who are spreading message from the spirit realm in your own way through your readings and through your radio show, and we're all sort of trying to do our part, and I think it's just wonderful.
It is, and if you look at it this way, because you just made a good point, if you had a jigsaw puzzle, if you're missing many pieces, you just don't get it. You need all the pieces. So you're a piece, I'm a piece, Cheryl's a piece. We all, in combination, show the bigger picture. That's what you're trying to say, right?
Exactly, yes. And we have to do our part, and I'm really very happy to be part of this team of messengers throughout the world who's spreading the message from spirit, and I think it's wonderful.
Well, it's wonderful to have you on again. We're going to have to do some more things with you in the future, and since we have less than a minute left, is there anything you'd like to announce or say?
No, other than if anybody wants to hear me in person, to give a presentation, I'm going to be speaking at the Ozark Mountain Transformation Conference in August 3 to 5 in in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, and that's the conference that's put on every year by my publisher. So I'll be there this year. If they want to hear, all the radio shows are already done, and all the future shows, I post them all on my YouTube page, which you can get to by my website. And this, by the way, David, is show 136 for me.
Wow, that's a lucky number.
That's amazing.
Too. That's quite a record. Yeah, we're going to have to up that number next time.
I'd be delighted to come back
so
again,
much.
David. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
It's been such a pleasure.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah,
always a pleasure to be on the show.
We need to talk about more, so we'll see you again soon in the future. And folks, go to GarnetSchulhauser.com. I'm going to spell it GarnetSchulhauser.com, and there he has links to his books and his YouTube channel, all kinds of information, including previous television, YouTube shows, radio shows, everything. Anyway, thank you very much for being here, Garnet, and God bless you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, David and Cheryll.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, everybody, for listening to Beyond the Gate Radio, and keep watching our channel for the next show. We have some more exciting guests coming up. So from Cheryll and I, good night, and see you next time.
Craving something warm? You're getting warmer. Warmer. Warmer.
Hi, welcome to Subway.
Warm up your taste buds with Subway's new steak mushroom melt panini. 100% Canadian seasoned steak topped with sliced mushrooms, melted mozzarella cheese, and grilled to perfection. Also available on Italian bread or grilled wrap. Hurry, get them while they're hot. For a limited time at participating restaurants.